So this little collection of clips is about the procedures of conventional scanning at the 7 Tesla here at Scannexus in Maastricht. And this is mostly in order to show new students how to pass the certified user test. So the first thing that is critical is how to get the key for the scanner. And the key is controlled, is locked over here and controlled with this little panel. And you start it by swiping your access card over this little field over here. Now you can see you can take something or return something. Now we want to take it, so we click enter over here and we can select which scanner we want to take it from. We want to get it from the 70, so we select the second row over here and press enter. Now we have a little green light over there, so we can open it and it tells us which key to get. So now we have the 7 Tesla key and we can close together the little box and we can go right away to the 7 Tesla. There are a few rules with respect to the key. Whenever there's a participant in the scanner room, never really remove the key again. Also, the certified user always needs to be inside of the key. So whenever there's a person inside the room and you're not allowed to remove the key from the door, this means that at least one certified user always needs to be in this room present. Never leave the room when there's a participant inside the scanner room. All right, now we can, I can show you how to return the key, which is slightly different now than it was a few years ago. So you return the key again by swiping the card over this little thing over here, and then you select the second one, the return option. However, it does not open the door just yet. First you need to press the key over this area over here. Now you can open it and it tells you where to return the key. And we're done. All right, concerning the participant interaction, the very first and most important thing is the safety screen form. They are distributed in each scanner room and also in the central hall. There are a few exclusion criteria and most of the things go without saying. One important thing that can happen from time to time is that people have any foreign objects in their body. And as soon as you have that, you always, exclamation mark, really always need to consult the MR safety board in order to clear that. This means that if you have, for example, some kind of a black plastic that holds intestines in place, which sometimes happens, even though you know it's not magnetic, you still need to consult the MRI safety board. And for that, you can write an email to the email address, namely safety@scannexus.nl. The only exceptions when it was, in my experience, not necessary to consult the safety board was when you have metal behind teeth, and then you can ask someone from Scannexus to allow you to even use that participant and scan him or her without consulting the safety board. Also, when you go through the safety screening, I usually have the habit of telling the participants the extra side effects of 7 Tesla and 9.4 Tesla. Namely, one thing that very often occurs at the scanner is that there are warnings that the participant might experience peripheral nerve stimulations. So I tell participants before they go in about the peripheral nerve stimulations. And this is also a point in the exam of the certified user, a checklist that the Scannexus people will go through. So make sure that you tell the participant that. So with respect to the participant, we can go inside the scanner, and for each participant, a certain thing needs to be prepared and changed. The first thing that definitely needs to be changed for participants is the cushions over there. This needs to be new every time. Also the cushion and the paper wrap around the head cushion needs to be exchanged every time. And one very important feature for every participant is that the earplugs. You should never ever forget the earplugs. I even have it as a check before I register my participant, really to not forget it, because it can happen. Maybe not like you think that you might remember it, but maybe in 1 out of 20 participants you forget it. And this is a huge violation and might shut down everything. So never forget to use ear protection. This is our participant, Artie, and he's now already in the coil. He has earplugs in there and is padded correctly, so now we want to position it. And in order to position it, we can use the laser. And you can switch on the laser with this little cross over here. There's a similar button on this side if you want to use that one. So now you see the laser. As soon as you have the laser, the participant must have closed its eyes already. So now we can align the participant with these buttons. This button is slowly going in, this is slowly going out, this is to the isocenter, and this is to the home position all the way out. So now I want to go slowly in, like this one, and I go in further and further and further and further until this little cross is right between the eyebrows, something like this, if you can see that. Now we have it at the position where we want to be at the isocenter, and we can kind of lock that position by again pressing the laser button a second time. So now there's you on the screen, which is a bit delayed and not so interpretable anyway, but now this is locked, and as soon as we press the isocenter button now it will go to isocenter. But we should not forget to close the receive coil and the transmit coil. So now I can press the isocenter button and it will go all the way in, very, very slowly. Make sure that this button is not selected. This light is not light and bright. If it is, you can switch it off with the speed button. The speed button is only an option that you can use if there's a phantom or if you want to get a coil in or so. So now I'm getting the participant out because I want to show you one thing that very often fails, maybe 1 out of 14 or 15 times. Namely, that you click on the laser button and there's nothing happening. As soon as that's happening, then you need to kind of switch the table off and on again. One thing would be often to kind of use that button, wait 20 seconds, the on-off, and switch it on again. Sometimes that also doesn't help. Then you can kind of use the stop button over there. This is kind of an emergency stop button, which definitely switches it off. So now I'm pressing this one. As soon as the stop button is pressed, it's not unpressable again. So in order to unpress it, you rotate it a bit clockwise, and now it's out again. Another trick sometimes to kind of reset the table is when you go to the rear end and you slightly, very softly, push it in a bit and out a bit so that the home position is met again. Make sure, however, that you do it softly because there are a lot of wires in there and they can break, and if they're broken then the entire table needs to be changed. The very last option on the table is that when everything fails, the participant wants to get out and you want to press him and pull him out very quickly, then there is an emergency handle over there. You can always open it and then get the participant out. However, in my maybe 200 sessions that I scanned already, I never really needed to use this option. Yeah. Okay, so now let's talk about how to collect physiology, namely the traces of the respiratory signal and the cardiac signal, specifically important for physiological noise correction in fMRI. So here Siemens provides these devices, which are always kept here for charging. When you are done with the scan, make sure that you reattach them and that these little green lights appear. This means they are charging. So now let's go into the scanner board and show you how to attach those. So here we have our participant. Let's start now with the cardiac signal. This is the one without the 3 little cables, and you can squeeze out this little hole here and put any finger in there, usually the index finger. One potential cause of not too good signal quality for the cardiac signal is that when some people, especially in the cold days, have cold hands. And in those cases, I usually make a little improvised glove to kind of warm the participant's hand and keep it warm. Just wrap the hand in a little paper tissue. So this is now the cardiac. Let's do the respiratory signal. For the respiratory signal, we use this little air pressure gauge over here, where we need a balloon, this little air balloon, and attach it right over there. So now, depending on the breathing, this air balloon will be pressed and released, which is captured and wirelessly sent to the scanner system. In order to keep it pressing and releasing during the breathing, we can use one of those little belts, which we can position below the participant. And I usually position it at the lower space of the rib cage. And then we attach this little balloon right over there. And it should not be too tight. Is it too tight?
No.
Okay, so now we can check the signal quality outside at the scanner. And we should check it every time, because sometimes it's not the best. So here at the scanner console, we have this little button, which is showing us the traces of the physiology. So here we have the respiratory signal in the top and the cardiac signal in the bottom. And now you can see that the respiratory signal needs to kind of find its way, and it auto-adjusts the gate, the range, and it should be not ceiling, and we should see a nice sine curve eventually, which I think the automatic adjustment will happen very soon. Maybe if we restart it like that, then you can see it's breathing in, breathing out, breathing in, breathing out.
I'm going to explain to you how to use the sensometric system. This is the sensometric cable, and we keep the attachments always here in the magnet room. So the actual cable is here. It's always important that you put blue, red with red, and then there's a certain way you need to put the arrows on top of each other. This way. Then the participant has to select their size. I'm going to use these ones now. The black ones are a bit harder, they're less comfortable, so better use the orange ones. And it's important that you screw these on. And when the participant puts them in their ear, the sound is conducted via air. It's important that you're not squishing this part, because there's the little tube in there. So really push the sides, and then red goes into the right ear, and the participant can put them in, and they will inflate again. And then do so for the other ear. What we also have then are these pads that come with them. We have the covers, so we put these in, so the participant has the extra sound protection when they put their hand in the coil. We can ask them to put them next to their ears. Yes, that's that part. You are not allowed to use the dielectric pads with the sensometric system. What else is important? I think that's it for here. Then we can check the sounds here. If this button is turned on and you play the stimuli, you can hear the stimuli in the console room. This box needs to be turned on. This is the master shelf. If your participant, so this is where you can regulate the volume as well as here. This should not be on max, but usually around 20 is good, up to 34 I think. Otherwise you might get clipping of the sounds if it's too high. And left and right you can modulate independently. So let's say that for some reason the volume, the earbud is not exactly in a perfect position and the left one is softer for the participant, you can adjust it manually, increase the volume, and then they hear it. It's important that it's on the stereo though. And
do I need this box?
no, you don't need this box. This can be off. Yes, that's this part. Should we play some sounds? So let's be here. Hear the sounds via the speaker. You can turn this down a bit. And also ask your participant then whether they hear the sounds properly before you start. And also it's good to check again once they're lying inside the coil and close the coil, as subtle movements can sometimes lead to the participant hearing the sound differently loud in each ear. And also try to adjust the volume here and here a little bit, usually, so these always in the default position start up. Because it can be that there's a bit of background static, and when you're reducing the volume here, for instance, and increase it at the computer, it might get better. So it's a bit of figuring out what works.
How do I attach my computer? Is there an AUX cable?
Yes. So if you bring your own laptop, we have this AUX cable here that you can attach. Otherwise, if you're using the Stimulus PC, then it should just work, and the sounds, if you play them there, will also be heard by the sensometric system.
Okay, so now let's talk about the intercom with the participant. So now the participant is in the scanner and we have this little device over here that helps us to talk to the participant. If you have earplugs and use the auditory system, you can additionally use this little device over here. However, this is just on top of that. You can always still use this little device. So I will talk about this one only. So it has a speak button, namely this one. And you can if you want to say something, you press it and you speak. Note, however, that as long as you have it pressed, you cannot hear what the participant is telling you. The important buttons aside of that one is this button, which adjusts on how loudly you hear what's in the scanner board. So if I turn it up there, you can hear that the helium pumps, so this is very loud already. You usually want to make it a bit quieter when the scanner is running. Some people like to listen to the scan, so don't make it completely quiet. This speak volume here is usually on max anyway, I would not touch it. You can switch off the listening side here with this little button. However, it has the same function as if you just make it very quiet. So now let's try it. And I ask my participant if she's all right. Are you feeling all right?
Yes, I'm feeling all right.
Okay. So I can only hear her when I'm not talking. Now let's see what happens when my participant presses the alarm button. As you can hear, it's very loud. You don't need to panic. Usually, even though I'm also always nervous when participants press the button, you just reset the alarm with pressing the speak button. And this is very convenient because when the participant presses the alarm, you usually want to speak to the participant anyway. So now I can ask, you press the button, is everything all right?
Yes.
Okay. And you can do so by hovering over there, patient, and register it, and following the Scannexus procedure, we just type in the first and last name initials of the operator, not the patient. So I'm Renzo Huber, so I will make it Ren Hub, and I can add the year and the date because it's convenient. It's June 7th. I usually just copy paste that one to the patient ID. And now we have a phantom on the table. Let's say our phantom is 30 years old and it weighs about 72 kilograms. You can select your study. I want to select my study. Here, for example, using any kind of template, for example, this one. And as always, when doing head imaging at the 7 Tesla scanner, we use the head first supine orientation, and we can start our exam. it sometimes asks us for registration confirmation, the most important parameters, everything makes sense. And sometimes they also ask about if it's really the participant because the table didn't move and whatever. Just click OK. So the next thing that I do is just to run a localizer. And for example, I can just run this localizer here, drag and drop it in our queue. So now, for example, it asks us, is this really your participant? Yes, it is. We just didn't move the table after we registered it. And this error or warning usually does not appear when you register the participant before you put him on the table. The next warning is that we manipulated the transmit voltage, and obviously we did that because at 7 Tesla the automatic adjustment does not really work so well, or it takes way too long to waste time on it for the localizer. The next thing is the stimulation warning, and this is maybe important as a reminder to tell the participant that they might experience peripheral nerve stimulations following the guidelines from Scannexus and the ethics consenting from FPN. Usually you explain to participant this already outside the scanner during the consenting, so we can just click OK here. So now it does the localizer, depending on which kind of localizer you have. This might take maybe a minute or a few seconds. You can hear here, this is a very simple 3-slice localizer of the 3 orientations. You can see how the patient is lying in there. This would be the coronal section. The center one would be coronal. This would be sagittal and transversal. So now we can already align our fMRI. And usually for layer-dependent fMRI, we are using kind of SLAB protocols. As soon as you double click it, very often it asks you if you want to use the automatic or manual mode. Never use the automatic one. It does weird things, specifically with shimming, face orientations, face encoding orientations. Always use manual. So now here we have kind of our alignment. I don't know here if we want to use a simulator visual or sensory motor setup. Let's look at a sensory motor setup. Here we have our the yellow box would be our imaging region, which is always there as soon as you select a scan and have it open here. The green box is our shim box, which is not always there. In case you do not see it, you can always go on the right here to this button and select it or unselect it. So when you don't see it, just click this button once or twice and then you will definitely see it. Also, while we are talking about this button, sometimes after rebooting the scanner, the zoom pan is not really selected, but instead the arrow pan, which is not so helpful. So I usually like the zoom pan, because then when you kind of hover to the edge of the image and now click with the left mouse button up and down, you can zoom in and out if you like. All right, then in my experiments, I usually advise people to use the third order shim. So in order to switch on this third order shim, we hit the Control Escape shortcut and then go to Test Optimizations and switch it on and hit any key to continue. So now it's switched on. If you want to be really, really sure, you can go again and look at the shim info, and here we have 15 channels, which is the right number of channels. If it's 0, then you did not switch it on. The next thing that I want to do is switch on the third order shim set, the little interface from Siemens, allowing us to set this third order shim column currents. And also for fMRI, we not only want to use the third order shim, but we also want to use advanced reconstruction pipelines. And you can also adjust those advanced reconstruction parameters by again hitting the Control Escape shortcut, and then here down for the run command we type in xbuilder, xbuilder, there. And here we have a little editor, and you can change any kind of reconstruction parameters from the global ICE config file, which when you click the open file button, it's usually the last one that was selected. If it's not the last one, go to medcom config ICE, and then within the ICE folder, use the ICE config EVP. Open it, and here we have a lot of parameters. The one I always change is iPad, improved crupper, and switch it to 1, from -1 to 1. Then, dependent on the applications, I usually play around with the kernel size. The default is 3 by 4. Here for a sensory motor experiment, I would usually do not make the kernel that big, maybe go to 2, because after all, we don't have so many independent RF channels available there. So, improve crupper and the crupper kernel size. The other parameter that I also change is the crupper noise reduction 1 parameter. And I change it from 1 to something maybe of 2000. You can go to 3000, 5000. If you have artifacts, go easy on it and maybe change it back to 1000 or so. Also, within the application here, go to POX and the number of iterations, where the default is 2, and I select 8. And I can save this and close this again. This file is always overwritten when you register a new participant, so you only need to change it after you registered the participant, and it will not affect the person scanning after you. Different to the third order shim, which you always need to switch back off after you're done. So we still have this window here. Never close this window. As soon as you close it, the things might not work properly. You can minimize it though. So now we set our advanced reconstruction, and now we can do the shimming. And by shimming, while our run here is selected, we can go to options, adjustments, and then the very first thing that we do is a frequency adjust. And this takes a few seconds. And there we see, okay, we have already a nice peak and it converged. So because it converged, we can go to the next tab, the 3D shim, which allows us to do a field map by clicking measurement, or the measure button. So this takes a while, and you can hear that it's actually doing imaging right now. It's acquiring a field map. We can look at the magnitude and phase here in a sagittal view for kind of very much zoomed out imaging. So it's not really optimized for head imaging for that matter. So here we have our phase maps. You see areas where we have a lot of phase wraps are usually areas that are not shimmed perfectly. We care about the top part over there of the brain, which is already shimmed not too bad. So now we have a field map, so we can calculate the shim currents right over there and apply them to the system. This only applied them to up to second order. So now we want to use the third order shims too, by clicking this button on this little extra window over here. And usually I go through this entire process of frequency adjust, measurement, calculate, apply, and set 2 or 3 times. So let's do it at least 2 times now. So again, I go to the frequency adjust and hit go. And very often the second time, at the second iteration, this does not converge. Voila, it does not converge, so just hit go again, and then it usually converges. So now it did converge, we have a peak, and there's a yes over there, so we can go to the 3D shim, and again do measurements, which again acquires a field map, which is then used to fit the higher order spherical harmonics onto it to get the respective shim currents from it. Okay, we are done here. So now we can again calculate, apply, and set. Usually I do it 2 or 3 times. Here you can see that already from the first to the second iteration, it did not change a lot. So this should be actually okay already. So I can close our manual adjustment window. This one I do not want to close. I only want to minimize it. In fact, if you want to close it, it asks you, do you really want to close it? and yeah, you don't. If you're not done with the experiment. If you want to get back to that window, you can always hit the Alt-Tab shortcut over there, Alt-Tab, and get back to your little GUI to set the third order shim currents. Before we leave, we should not forget to switch off the third order shim. And we do so by, for example, first closing the little third order shim interface with Alt-Tab, this one. So now we want to close it. It warns us. So you really want to close it. Now we are done. We do want to close it. But we still did not switch it off, the number of channels from the third order shim. So now again I go to Control Escape, Test Automatizations, and now right at the bottom here we turn off the third order shim. We close the script by hitting any key, and I would advise you to check that it really worked, and you can double check always by going to Test Automatizations and using the Scannexus _shim_calc_info_xm, and there it should be 0. When you leave the scanner, it should be 0. And in fact, it should also be 0 when you approach the scanner. If it's not 0 when you approach the scanner, somebody before you screwed up. Please always switch it on after you're done, off after you're done. So now we have all these nice activation clusters here, and we would like to depict them in our planning windows in our for the alignment of the next scan. And in order to get there, we need to perform a few steps. The first is, again, go to the patient browser with this button, and there in our patient that we acquired right now, this sequence generated 4 different series of Nifty. The last one is the one that we care about. This is the mean overlaid with the set scores. And the first one is the positive contrast, second one is the positive and negative contrast, and the third one is the negative contrast only. So we care about the first one. However, this is in mosaic. So now we first need to split it into conventional dicoms, and we do so by clicking Application, Mosaic, Split to 1 series. This takes a second. You can refresh it on this button, and then very soon there will be another series over there. This is now a non-mosaic dicoms, and we can drag and drop them here in the 3D viewer. And this loads it right over there. And here we can navigate through it, and we might have our V5 clusters somewhere over here. And on the other side, for this task, I think this might be a good cluster here too. So we want now these areas to be covered, and then align our next high resolution layer slab accordingly. So I select the image down there. This is an axial-like view, and there I select my slices to be sagittally. So I select this button, click Start. Now it reslices it. You can see it on the bottom right. I close it again and save it. So I click Yes. So now it's saving it. Again, having this axial view highlighted, I again slice it, but now I slice it into the coronal section. You see the preview right over there. So I start it, it's reslicing them, then I close it, and I'm saving it with Yes. The third orientation would be the axial one, so I now select any of those 2 views, and there has been an internal problem, which is not supposed to happen. Please close patient and try again. I will just try again without closing patient. Hit Start and close again, and I save it, Yes. So now I have in my patient browser 3 additional series, and those are the ones that I want to have in my viewer over there. So I just drag and drop them one by one. Number 1 in the left one, number 2 in the middle one, and number 3 in the right one. And you can see that now we have the EPI data in our preview, and any kind of new additional sequence, for example here the Vasus lab sequence, can now be aligned according to these projections. First of all, I'm copying now the adjust volume, and I'm scrolling through here to the different orientations. This is the wrong direction. There. There we go. So we will definitely want to be deeper. I think this should be alright. Let's go all the way to the other side here and see if we are in there. I think we are in there. What does the neuron expert say? This would be V5, right?
Yes.
Alright, so here I'm now gonna show how to save protocols and export them to PDF. So first of all, I go to this little field, which is my exam explorer. And there you have, all the users have their different folders and subfolders. You need to have at least 3 stages, 1, 2, 3. For example, here, if I want to include a sequence with drag and dropping it, it does not allow it to me because I'm only in the 2nd stage, not the 3rd one. So the 3rd stage would be this one here. This is our scan, and then you can drag and drop it from your queue over there, all the sequences that you want to save. And for example, this one was the reverse phase encoding, and now this one is the actual run. You can change the parameters by doing right click and going to properties, and here, for example, I call it PA because it was posterior anterior phase encoding direction. This one was a run, and I can change the name with underscore run 1 or something. You see the overall scan duration of those. Now you can save it, and if you want to make a PDF out of it, I select the entire branch that I want to include in the PDF. So here I'm selecting all of them that are in there, and I go to Object and Print. And then it asks me where to save it, under which name. We want to save it as PDF, that's correct. And the convention, definitely here at Scannexus, is that you save it on the T drive. So here I want to save it with the name of our scan. So today is July 5th, and our initials are SEB, and we want to save the protocols, not the table of content, and not both. So we click OK, and this usually takes a while to generate the PDFs, sort it all together. Sometimes it fails, so I would recommend to always check it when you're done. So soon I hopefully can see that we are done. So now, to double check if it worked correctly, I hit Control Escape and click on any kind of file browser, and then in my file browser on my computer I can head over to the T drive, and right there we have it. So we can open it and see if it's not empty. It's not empty. We have here, for example, the localiser, and then all these other different runs up to our layer-dependent fMRI run with Renzo, and it even has the sequence version up there. So now this is directly on the scanner host, so we can copy-paste it and put it anywhere on the BU server that can also be accessed from outside. For example, in the shared folder, I can put it in a customized folder that I call for Alessandra, and I dump it in there. And now you can grab it and keep it in your notes, and maybe even on OpenNeuro if you want. Okay, so now I'm gonna show how to export data to the shared server so we can download them from there. So first I go to the patient browser, which is this little button over there. Alternatively, you can also go to patient and browser, and then we select our participant, which would be this one over here, and we want to send all the data that we have there to the shared folder. So for that we go to, after we selected this, go to transfer and then export to offline. And here you have a path of where we want to export it to, and we have this little drop down menu of already the server address, like BU server, and then backup data and so on. And you should find your name over here. So if you're doing this during the CU exam, you will not have a server yet because you're a space yet because you're not CU yet. And so let's just use anyone. So here, for example, L.Huber. So then this is the path, and you can add new folders. even folders that don't exist just yet. So here, for example, we now generate a new folder, which would be 2021-06-05. It's July is 6th month, right? Okay. So 7th. I apologize. And we hit go, and then because it's a new server, it asks us if we want to create it. We do, and then that's usually it. Down there, you see that now we have an export request. This is now being processed. If you want to check if the data are being sent or not, you can always go to transfer and click onto local job status. And there you see that here we have our participant not being exported just yet. Maybe it's still being processed. You can also check the status on transfer and network job status. And there you see that right over there, we might have an entire patient that is not being sent yet because it's still processing the request. But these are the things where you can check how long it might take, how many images are being sent already, and if this send request was successful or not. So now let's talk about the situation if something's happening and you don't know what to do. For example, there's an error message that you're not used to, or the scanner is not working properly, and then you think something's seriously wrong. So I guess one of the very first things you would do is use the phone, and on speed dial there is support staff. This is the reception at Scannexus, right over there, and very often when there's nobody on the reception, you can, and this usually forwards a message to the phone of a Scannexus person if they are in the building. Let's assume that they are not in the building and you need to solve it on your own, or your scanner, you can still not figure it out, and your data is still not good enough. Then it might be time also to look at the manuals. Right over there. There are a bunch of manuals, the Siemens ones. For me, the most helpful manual is the Scannexus manual, not the guidelines, but the manual. And this is kind of a summary of all the manuals over there. This has, for example, information of, let's say, just a password if your stimulus PC doesn't work, and you have been locked out for whatever reason. And it also it gives you the most important safety guidelines and so on. And this literally has screenshots of the other manual, for example, the Siemens manual in there. And not only for Siemens, but also the periphery. So this is a very useful resource. And this is that manual. In case you think that it's really not your fault and the system is still broken and your scan time is kind of lost, then you can use the electronic log. And this is the log which is on jira.scannexus.nl, where you need to have a login credentials already, and you usually get those if you are a certified user already. If you log in there, you can create a new issue or ticket, and then somebody at Scannexus will, depending on the issue of the problem, will deal with that. Very, very often, in most of the cases, in fact, the best debugging method is to reboot the scanner, even though this can be quite time consuming. So let's simulate what we do when we reboot the scanner. Siemens has procedures in place to do so, namely here in System, you can click on System and then Control Session. And there you would not like to restart system, but shut down the system. Because most of the time you really need to discharge all the capacitors in all the different subcomponents of the system. So you need to shut down, click this button, then you will see a countdown. This might take about 5, sometimes 7 minutes or so to really shut it down. As soon as you see now you can turn off the scanner, you can switch it off with this little key over here. Make sure that it's unlocked, and then you press System Off. You wait at least 3 minutes. Do it. I know your time is valuable and the scan time is valuable, but still, if you do the entire procedure and didn't wait enough time, then it's all for nothing. So switch it off, wait 3 minutes, and then switch it back on. Very often it takes a while in order to switch back on, and you will see a black screen and you think the system is broken. Just give it time, give it maybe 4 or 5 minutes, and then you will see the countdown coming up again. During this reboot process, I would recommend you not to touch anything. Don't touch the keyboard, don't touch the mouse until you hear the gradients making click, 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 3 clicking sound, which is kind of part of a test procedure of the gradients in order to see if all the kind of emergency shutdown procedures are in place. Only after this click, 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 then you can start touching the mouse and see if your system is behaving correctly again. This is the procedure on how to restart the scanner.